Roughly 2 weeks ago, the internet was shocked when the news around the former family vlog channel 8 Passengers dropped because it was terrifying. And I mean, until then, there's been plenty of speculations and coverage on how the mother treated her kids on camera, but I don't think anyone imagined how bad things really were. And things must have escalated a lot recently because it was only 2 years ago we were laughing at how the mother Ruby was reacting when she found out one of her kids had to dance to a song by Flo Rida Low. And it was also the instrumental song where the only vocals were the low, low, low part. And I guess that was too bad for her children to be a part of, but she allowed the incident that happened 2 weeks ago to happen. That doesn't make sense whatsoever. And for those of you guys know, the incident was with her 12-year-old son escaping her business partner's house. This business partner is named Jody because apparently the mother, Ruby, moved them into Jody's house for some reason. But her 12-year-old son escaped the house and ran to a neighbor begging for food and water and was duct taped. Police then arrived and searched the house the 12-year-old escaped from and found his younger sister in similar conditions. So Ruby and Jody were then arrested, and we then found out that Ruby and her husband had been living separated for roughly 13 months. So the next question was why? And how much was he involved here? Because as of recording this video, he hasn't been arrested. Because Ruby and Jody were currently in jail with no bail set. And again, as of recording this video, no criminal charges have been dropped on the father. But what did recently come out was an interview between the father's lawyer and Jesse Weber from Law and Crime. And there is a lot of eye-openers in this interview.
I think the best place to start is, how's your client doing right now?
He's busy. He's struggling, trying to make sense out of what's happened to him in the last 13 months and kind of coming out of a fog.
So in other words, he was completely taken off guard by these allegations, completely shocked?
Absolutely shocked.
Where was he when he found out about this?
He was at work.
And how did he find out? He found out on the news? Did someone call him?
He got a call from Ruby.
So this is interesting. So now because of this interview, we can get an inside picture of what was happening right before Ruby was arrested.
He got a call from Ruby Franke.
Correct.
You mean while after she was arrested?
Before.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. She had heard what was going on and knew they were coming for her and called him and said, this is an emergency, even though she hadn't reached out to him for months and months and months before that. She reached out to him when it was an emergency, knowing she could rely on him to help his kids.
So in other words, you're saying she knew the police were coming to arrest her. She calls Kevin to say, take care of the kids. How did she know the police were coming? Because again, the reporting indicates is that her son had escaped that house and called and went to a neighbor, and that's when the authorities were alerted. Do you know how she knew they were coming?
I would never want to predict anything that she might know. Kevin doesn't know. He doesn't know. I don't know how she knew what was going down. All he knows is he got a text from her that said, emergency, need to speak with you. He was at work and text back and said, I'm at work. What's up? And she said, I need to speak to you immediately.
How would she know? Unless they saw the kid escape via like a Ring camera or some sort of surveillance camera and thought, oh, this is inevitable. Because what we've seen from the last coverage is Jody and Ruby were not close to any of Jody's neighbors. So it's unlikely that one of those neighbors would have alerted one of them.
So they spoke on the phone, and when she told him that the police were coming, what did he say?
She actually didn't say that. She just said, you need to get down here.
You need to get down here. And what did he say about that?
And he said, down where? And when she told him that she was in Ivans, he responded and said, what are you doing in Ivans? And she then told him that the kids were down there. Some of the kids were down there and he needed to come down. And he said, well, how long have you been in Ivans? He wasn't even told that she had taken the kids to Ivans.
This whole lawsuit is just getting started, and I have a feeling a lot's gonna come out. You know those iceberg graphs that people were doing on YouTube for a while? We've been covering this family since 2020, and I feel like we're still barely underwater now. I feel like this lawsuit's going to reveal some horrifying stuff on the 8 Passengers iceberg.
So, first of all, their current status, were they separated?
Correct.
They were separated, I read, for 13 months. So they weren't living with each other. How much was he seeing the kids?
Almost not at all. Actually, not at all.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because she told him it was better, that they needed to work on their marriage and needed to keep their family together, but that everything was better off with him not in the home and not communicating with the children.
If you can, why were they separated? What was the catalyst?
I probably shouldn't go into that. That's pretty private.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say they had a difference of opinion about their family.
Parenting? I know you can't talk about it, but is it that kind of where we're going?
Correct.
Okay, now, first of all, we're going to have to take everything here with a pinch of salt because this is the father's lawyer here. No one really knows 100% what was going on in the house but the family. But if the father disagreed with Ruby's parenting and didn't know of all the apparent insanity that was going on recently, wouldn't that be a good thing for the kids? Because then at least there's hope they have one sane parent. Because no matter what, it's the kids who lose the most here. They didn't ask to be here, so at least you can give them a stable home. And from what we've seen now, it doesn't seem like they've had that. And I've had friends who've had terrible experiences in the US foster care system, so I wouldn't really call that stable either. So the father might be the best bet, but again, who knows? Because if he's been away from them for 13 months, he's also failed them. Overall, it just seems like the kids are stuck between a rock and a hard place because of their mother, and I feel terrible for them.
So let me again,
in their own personal dynamic.
Okay. So he was living separate from her. Was he calling the kids? Because I think what a lot of people are looking at this and they're wondering, well, what did he know? So he might have been living separately from her for 13 months, but he wasn't calling the kids, checking in on the kids, seeing how they're doing. He's the father.
I totally understand that. That was the big question on my mind and the big question on a lot of people. If you've read everything that's in the media, he's getting raked over the coals for that. But what people don't understand is that he was trying to preserve his marriage. He was taking direction from her. She's the one who asked him to leave the house and indicating that in order for him to be able to get back together with her and be a family, that she was requesting that he leave the home and that he not contact them or the children. Later told him that everything was blissful at home. It was so much better without him.
Wow. But she still calls him when she needs his help. I'm really interested in his involvement with the spinoff channel of 8 Passengers, which was Connections, because right around the time they allegedly stopped living together, they created this channel Connections. And you can see here that in the early content of Connections, he was at least there making content. But back to what the lawyer was saying, if that's accurate, it sounds like the father was living the worst nightmare of marriage. That just doesn't sound like a partnership anymore, and it sounds more like Ruby's the boss and Kevin's just doing whatever to keep her happy.
Did he ever believe that the kids were in danger? Did he ever believe that Ruby might have been doing something to the kids?
He had nothing to indicate that.
So again, I know you're limited in what you can say, but just again, piecing that together, if Ruby Franke told Ruby Franke told Kevin that, it's better off he's not part of the home, and, that he lived separately from them and not to have any contact. He just took that as, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Or did she prevent him in any way from seeing the kids? Did he want to see them and talk to them and she told him no?
Emotionally, she was controlling him because she knew how much he valued their marriage and valued their family. And it was his desire to be able to get back with the family and preserve his marriage. So he was taking direction from her. And her direction was, it's so much better off. And I think we can salvage our marriage if you just, for now, don't have communication with the kids. And I will communicate with you. I'll reach out to you when we need to have communication.
Well, that's depressing. I'm trying to understand, what's the upside for Ruby to this? Control? Has she replaced her husband with this new business partner, Jody? I'm so lost here, but again, even though they're painting him as a victim here, he still failed his kids. 13 months without seeing her kids is wild.
And even though they had a difference of opinion, possibly about parenting, that never gave him a concern to, hey, you know what, maybe I should check in, because if it seemed like it was a big enough issue for them to separate, it didn't seem like an issue for him to check in on.
Kevin never had any reason to believe that his children were being, if he had even one inkling that his kids were being, and that this separation wasn't for any other purpose than to figure out a way between he and Ruby to reunite their family, he would have been down there in 2 seconds.
Do they currently
had no idea?
He had no idea. He had no idea that this was going on.
No, physically, had never been a part of their family.
Well, if that's true, that's good because at least there's potentially a close family member that can take care of the kids. But again, we have no idea of what actually happened. This case is definitely going to get really interesting. But overall, it's just such a depressing case. And I think it's the second large family vlog channel court case behind, I guess, Daddy 05. But also, this case is just way beyond the basic YouTube family vlogging shenanigans.
Do Kevin, your client, and Ruby, have they been talking at all while she's in jail?
The last conversation they had was last Friday. And that's when, during that conversation, is when he came to his senses about how he'd been manipulated and deceived.
Are you saying he confronted her about these allegations?
To some degree. I don't know the entire contents of the conversation, but his discussion with me was that during that conversation, things were said that made him realize how he'd been deceived and misled. And as I told you earlier, he didn't even know the kids were in Ivan's.
Just the whole thing of Ruby wanting him away from them to fix the marriage and her saying how great things are without him. That just sounds like a nightmare. He sounds kind of delusional for going along with that. And I get that it's way easier as an outsider to see, oh, that's game over. But still. And the business partner, Jody, does come up.
What does he say about Jody Hildebrandt?
That she's manipulated him in conjunction with Ruby, that she's been kind of the spearhead toward essentially destroying his life and destroying his family.
How did Jody and Ruby get connected? Does Kevin know?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Is Kevin believing that perhaps it was Jody who was manipulating Ruby in this? Or because it also sounds like Kevin feels he was manipulated by Ruby. Is it just all the blame on Jody?
I think it was a team effort, but with Jody being the spearhead and creating a situation that's just caused all of this destruction of his family.
Again, how would you let this go this far? 13 months separated is wild. At some point, wouldn't he want to see his kids? I recently isolated myself from my family for 2 weeks due to being on the trip, then getting COVID, and 2 weeks felt like an eternity. I had the wildest case of FOMO in just those 2 weeks, so I can only imagine how this guy felt after 13 months.
Have the authorities reached out to your client?
Oh, certainly. He's interviewed with them.
And they see him as a potential witness?
They haven't said that. He was interviewed with them the day this all occurred. He drove to St. George to get his children, and they met him and interviewed him.
But going back to the father's involvement with the Connections channel, according to his lawyer, his involvement stopped 1.5 years ago.
And he hasn't spoken to me about what amount of money was ever generated by that. He actually, pardon the phrase, but he actually disconnected from any involvement with Connections 1.5 years ago, and hasn't had anything to do with 8 passengers for even longer than that.
So did they have videos of him that were uploaded after he left? But either way, now we know what Ruby did before her arrest. But what did the family really know? So now we have the father's side of the story where apparently he didn't know of anything that was going on. And now you have another video of Ruby's sister coming out with what she knew, where she claimed,
I did everything that I could with the knowledge that I had.
But then she blames the father, Kevin.
The one person that could have done something within his legal right was Kevin. We had 0 contact with him. It was Kevin's job to check in on things, and he did not. So when I say that Ruby and Kevin and Jody and Connections have been destroying our lives offline for the last 3 years, that is exactly what they've been doing, causing turmoil within our family. We would talk in circles because nothing made sense.
Yeah, there's definitely more blame to be put on the father than the aunt in this scenario, but Kevin's lawyer did respond to this as well.
He was just simply following what she and Jody were telling him.
Kevin Franke's attorney says the father of 6 did whatever Hildebrandt and Ruby told him to.
He was being berated and belittled and torn down by Jody, and constantly being told he was selfish and greedy and he needed to repent.
Kester says Ruby told her husband to move out of the family home.
If you want to stay married and you want to patch up our marriage and make things work and help our children, you'll stay away.
Overall, it is just a very tough situation. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this case. I'm just hoping that whatever happens is the best case for the kids.